The digital art era is here. AI and art creation tools empower anyone to make it. Blockchain technologies allow anyone to own it. VR, AR, and extended reality immerse us in it. Let's talk to artists and innovators behind the visual magic. I'm your host, Roger Dickerman. Welcome to the future of art. Today, we welcome Michael Kutsche. Michael is a principal character designer for countless feature films, including Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland, and he's worked with Disney, DreamWorks, Marvel, Sony, Warner, Sega, and so many more. He is an artist who exists at the intersection of century-spanning artistic movements and mythical creatures, historical figures, and pop culture. He creates paintings and animations that evoke nostalgia, exist in parallel realities, and would have us consider the human condition. Since arranging and ultimately having this interview, I continue to learn how much of an inspiration Michael is to other digital artists. It's a sign that his decades of experience shine through. As the 9th episode of The Future of Art, it's the longest interview yet, which I think tells you a lot about its substance. His perspective inspires me, and I hope it does the same for you. Let's get to it. Michael, welcome to The Future of Art.
Thanks for having me, Roger. It's a real pleasure. I've been a fan of the show you're creating, and yeah, it's a real honor to be a guest of yours.
It's an honor to be here with you. We have to give some initial flowers to a very special person. That person is Nick Sulo, and he, I believe, is responsible for introducing us quite some time ago, because we had been talking about possibly doing an origin story, which is another show, and then now here we are, all these months later.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, Sulo is definitely one of the artists I connected with early on in the space. And definitely one of the ones that easily stood out from the beginning, and we actually connected because we actually did collect my third piece, my third NFT, and yeah, we've been in touch ever since, and yeah, it's pretty amazing, like the way we connect in the space. Still amazes me.
And that piece is the connoisseur #1. I was revisiting today, and actually that was before I believe that was before we were introduced.
Yes,
but
yes.
I was aware of I think that was the moment you had started to come on my radar, loosely speaking, and then he made the connection, and then I followed along ever since.
Yes. Yeah, I think like when I connected with him through that piece, he told me that he actually knew my work from a longer time ago, because I've been, working as a digital artist for more than 20 years. So there's quite a handful of people in the space that pointed this out. And even, DK said this, like he bid on one of my pieces, and he said, like, he was still studying when my Alice in Wonderland work was kind of like on the internet. And so it's kind of nice to see it, coming full circle.
Indeed. Well, before we go completely full circle, I want to take a step all the way back. I'm going to ask you the toughest question first. And Michael, the toughest question is, how do you define art?
Yeah, I think it's multi-layered. It's for one part is probably like and I can see this when I see my kids doing art before they have any kind of education on it, or a lot of the concepts that you later learn about it. It's a way to get in touch with the world that surrounds you, and a way of processing the world. And it's a bit like you're getting into it's observation, and then trying to replicate what you see, but then you see that you can replicate it in a different way, and that becomes like your own kind of fingerprint or visual language. And this feedback is, I think, what keeps you going, because this is a game that you can basically play endlessly, and it will always be different. Like there's always going to be some change or evolution. And that's like one large part of it. Um, and I would say the other part of it is what fascinated me when looking at art. Um, like some of the earliest things that got me really inspired were French comic artist Möbius, which I found in I think it was in a supermarket. No, at a at the local train station where I was waiting for, because I had to go by train to the school, to the city, and there were always kind of, you know, some waiting time, and I would be hanging out in this bookstore, and Möbius comics were the thing that totally kind of blew my mind, and I tried to emulate the way he was drawing, and I think what got me so excited about it was that it was like a portal into a different world. It's almost like the artist mind is like a portal to another world that you can step into and then learn or see the world through his eyes. And I think this is one of the reasons why I'm doing it myself. Like I'm using the art to step into this other world. It's kind of like a parallel world that has some things are similar to our world, but other things are kind of turned upside down. And a bit like in Alice in Wonderland or these kind of stories. Um, and I think that's, yeah, these are basically the main two things that excite me about art.
How would you categorize your journey? Because you just got done saying you have more than 2 decades in art,
Mhm.
and yet the digital art ownership space as it is, I believe, you're approximately two years in the space. Is that accurate?
Yeah, early 2021. Yeah.
Perfect. So early 2021.
Mhm.
How do you think about that? How do you think about 2 decades in art and then what this is? And I don't even want to bias you more than that, but how do you think about
Mhm.
those phases?
Um, yeah, especially for the ones like myself, and I've been working in an traditionally before I started digitally. Um, so like early 90s, I would already be drawing, you know, with pencils or paint and oils, and kind of um, create something like that I would call my own visual language or something. And in the late 90s, I started working with 3D programs, and so being, having worked in advertising and then later in film, um, and my desire, or the one thing that's never been fully satisfied was my like hunger to create my own kind of like my own worlds, my own paintings, my own and it's like several layers to this, because I'm deeply interested in fine art, but also entertainment. So it's always kind of like wavering between those two. Like a lot of the inspiration is coming from comics, but also like my favorite painters. And so I'm kind of like never really fully leaning to one or the other. Um, but this desire to create my own stuff, it was always, through all those years, even with the success with the film industry, um, there's always a practical side to what you have to deliver as an illustrator, and so the really having your own voice is never fully satisfied in those fields, and but it was never a question of, oh, could I turn the way I naturally work, which is digitally, um, into this type of fine art, or into selling this type of art to collectors. There was never something that crossed my mind, actually, because I knew that some of the painters I was interested in would be starting with Photoshop or sometimes even 3D tools to create their preliminary sketches that they later would translate into painting them in oils or acrylics. And this was always kind of like idea of like, if I would be creating art, that's the only way. I need to put it on a canvas so it's unique and there's one of a kind physical thing, and then a gallery would be able to sell it. And there have been a couple of occasions where I got in touch with galleries, but for several reasons, never fully pulled through with the thing. I sold a couple of oil paintings over the years, but yeah, it never became this thing of like, okay, having my like solo show or anything. But when NFTs came along, this was kind of like, especially when you are in this kind of mindset for so long, it's almost like a shock. You feel like, holy shit, this is actually something, like you couldn't believe that it's real in the beginning. And even like the whole thing, like how you mint your work and how you become part of this community and how you present yourself, and then to the point where you sell your first piece and you still can't believe it. It's almost like, and then you tell all your friends, I told my wife, like, actually, because she was kind of skeptical, is this like actual real money? Is like, isn't that just like a scam? Or and then these kind of questions,
a common
like,
first reaction. Common first
yeah,
reaction.
exactly. Yeah, no one could believe it, and it was quite touching actually. And because the connection with a collector is also, from what I heard from my friends who work in the traditional art world, where there's mostly the communication is going through the art dealer. Very often you never even see the collector, but here it's an actual conversation you have on Twitter, oftentimes with an anonymous person, but still it's a person who's genuinely interested in what you're creating. And even if you can make hundreds of like an infinite amount of physical copies of it, or digital copies, this one thing that he collected as an NFT is unique, and it really requires a lot of like thinking about how value is actually created, and what it, because it's an invention of society, right? But before you really think deeply about it, you take all these rules for granted, and I don't know, it's was definitely yeah, like I said, at first a shock, and really amazing surprise. And it still is, like, even in this bear market, um, the way we look at digital art, myself included, is, yeah, it's art. And before that, it wasn't. It was always like, oh, this is like the lesser type of, it's more like a practical thing, or yeah, you do it for client work or something, but it's not actual art. And this mindset has completely changed, and now we can see the work in at the MoMA in LACMA, and it's quite amazing.
There's so much to unpack there, and we can go about this several ways. I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind is it really makes us consider that the concept of ownership, ownership and connection to anything, but in this case, connection from a collector to a work of art to an artist, and then in reverse, from an artist to the work of art to a collector. It's a real thing. And to me, who I was an art enthusiast, but certainly not steeped in art history, and the past 3 years have been a rapid fire crash course in digital art history, and then extending back to a fascination with all facets of art history and how all of these dots connect. It was obvious to me that digital art was art. And when we were faced with these various crises moments of quote unquote the space, the crypto art space or the digital art space, looking outside the walls and saying digital art is not respected for XYZ reasons, that was shocking to me. Because again, I'm coming at it from the outside looking in. I'm saying, of course, it's art. And I think that history will, of course, in decades smile on it. And I think that will all be a moot point and not an issue at all. And in some ways, a philosophy that I have, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on this, I feel that the marketplace of digital art ownership, and I know people don't love to talk about it, but the financialization or the money that has gone into digital art now has played a role in altering, of course, auction house perspectives on it. And I think ultimately that inevitably goes to museums as well. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think it's something that I've even written about in some recent thread, how the price is being paid for art give the art a context that's similar to where you see the art. There's this famous experiment where a guy is playing on this $1 million violin in a subway station, and people are just like walking by and don't care. And it's or this idea, if you put any type of object into this white cube gallery, it becomes art, or it becomes elevated, and it looks precious just because we know the content. Like usually only blue chip art is in that room, so whatever is, even if it's, you know, someone left a chair in there and you put a tag to it, people would think, oh yeah, it's conceptual art, probably very expensive or something. So with the ways that especially in the first year, like where yeah, this bull run happened in 2021, there seemed to be no boundaries to how high the art could be priced. And I noticed that it changed my perception of it too. Like there were pieces where that I, like at first sight, didn't stand out to me that much, but then they had I don't know, some crazy price tag on it, and a collector bought it and continued to buy it from this artist, like multiple pieces. And then it just urged me like to take a closer look at, okay, what is it? What does the collector see in this work? And it changed the way I saw it. And which is a good thing, but can also be sometimes misleading in a way that I think someone pointed out lately, that some of the probably most innovative art in NFTs can be had for under 1 Ethereum. And but you need to be educated enough on it to understand why. And it goes back to not just what's happening in crypto and crypto art, but also contemporary art and art history. And then you kind of can pinpoint down, okay, this is the innovative part. But lots of the people would probably overlook it because it doesn't look as shiny, or it's not very impressive. But it's just interesting to think, not the price is not always really the barometer for or the indicator of like how innovative the work is or how special it is. And it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out over the next 10 years or 50 years, how the value will change over time, especially those pieces I spoke about. You know, they're under 1 Ethereum now, and then you have the most highest priced art right now. How will this play out in the future? And I don't know, it's just very interesting that there's a connection between the two, but we have to be very careful not to say, oh, because this is 100 Ethereum, it's the best art in the world. And vice versa. No one is buying this, it must be shit. maybe just people don't understand it yet, and the right people who understand it probably don't have the money to buy it, because they're curators and they don't buy art. Or yeah, just my 2 cents.
It's a great 2 cents, and it's a fascinating time we find ourselves in. 2023, less than a decade removed from this even being a thing, and only a few years removed from that bull run that really tripped off a lot of the more mainstream conversations around it. And I think it's safe to say that it's still small enough from a collector standpoint and still uneducated enough from a collector standpoint. And there's a whole new swath of collectors that have come in from cryptocurrency and have developed a fascination with art and with digital art. With artists like yourself, and a lot of other key examples with literal decades of art experience and a huge body of work behind you, a lot of which you contributed in a commercial sense, but also a lot of self-work. It's fascinating to me to think it's still early enough for somebody to develop a keen eye and make distinctions and find those artworks and those artists for under one ETH, and have a far greater opportunity in digital art than in the broader world of art, just because of the era this is.
100%, yeah. Because it's there's so much more detailed information and historical data in traditional art, that it's probably next to like the types of hidden gems you can find here, never possible in traditional art, I would say. And but it also makes it creates this excitement around, like, oh, I'm probably gonna find the next next Michel Basquiat or Jackson Pollock in digital art, and I think people shouldn't criticize that too much, because it's just one facet to the whole thing. Is also like, I think Gary Vee said something like, when he makes his predictions of what kind of business is going to be big in 10 years or so, it's good to be right. So it's like you're betting on the future, and this gambling attitude is part of any of us, I think. And like, if you watch like a movie for the first time, and if it's something that's hard to categorize, and people say like, okay, this is like either complete bullshit or it's a masterpiece, and then if it turns out to be, like one of the best films in 10 years still, then people can feel great about, like, oh yeah, I was one of the first who appreciated it. And same here, like, I was one of the first to appreciate this artist, and I knew that he had something going, like an unpolished diamond or something. And the idea, maybe I even helped him along the way, because I collected like his early pieces. So it's all very intertwined, and I think we shouldn't be too critical of people, having a monetary interest in things. It's just like part of the whole game, I guess.
It's uncomfortable to some, to varying degrees, because of how transparent it is. It's 24/7, 365. It's a public ledger.
Yes.
It's inextricably linked to social networks like Twitter and Discord, at least in this era, at least in this time and place. A lot of these relationships are being forged real time in public discourse and direct messages. And I think that, at least for the how I would very, very roughly classify it, I think from 2020 to maybe mid 2021, no surprise when the bull run was taking off and it was all kumbaya and good vibes all around. There weren't many critical or negative discussions happening. Of course, once that turns around a little bit, the discourse has changed a bit. I think too negatively. I think sometimes we do hear about whether it's various crypto scams or infighting between people, or collectors who maybe aren't really collectors and don't have much appreciation at all for the art, and it's more about the financials, which, it's their right, but it's not always so positive when you see it in public discourse. I always try to find a time and place. I think this is the perfect one to shine a light on the other side to that, because we are seeing strong, positively critical discussions going on right now about collectors who are able to play a transparent public role in education and in educating relative to an artist's body of work and to supporting that artist in the ways that you were just going through. And I find that fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. Collectors like Vincent van Gogh or Cosimo Medici, they might be like the shining beacons of this type of collector. But you can also see smaller collectors were probably, even if they only collect editions, but you can see it like very easily. Like if maybe like when this all started, it wasn't so easy to see through it, but now you kind of just have to browse the timeline a little bit, and it kind of gives you like an impression of what this person is about, and the types of things they are sharing, and it creates a vibe of what they are about, and it feels like the market kind of has gone through so many things so quickly, and by now we're like in this phase where it's really kind of like the thing that's been standing out is how it's really about the art, and whatever you put on top of it, it's not gonna change that. And so a lot of the projects that happened like during the bull run felt a bit more like sales pitches, or but it all wouldn't have happened if it hadn't started with the art, I think. And now it feels like we're coming back to the roots of it, and which is a good thing.
Yeah, I'm fine. I would go for me at least, my lens or my worldview, this worldview starts with the artist, and I would like to go back to something. So for me, I'm medium agnostic, right? And so if I'm a believer in Michael, or if I'm a believer in Beeple, or if I'm a believer in anybody within the space or beyond it, I start with that artist, and I'm interested in the provenance of that artist. And so for me, that's why I think it's easier for me to say there's a massive and incredible and crystal clear future in this, because I don't necessarily mind if the blockchain pivots or if the artist pivots a little, as long as the artist keeps being him or herself. I think the rest takes care of itself, as long as they continue to care about their craft and about their collectors to an extent.
Absolutely.
I think it all takes care of itself, no matter if there are a few pivots or twists and turns along the way. And so the question I wanted to ask you, let's look at you mentioned selling a few physical works in the past, and then you mentioned first blockchain sale in the year 2021. How would you reflect or compare and contrast the feeling or the experience of selling your first ever physical work and then selling your first ever digital work?
Yeah, for the first physical work, it's quite telling that I was about to sell it, but now it's still hanging behind my desk. So the story was I rented a studio in Frankfurt during the time, and I kind of split my time in half between working for a 3D animation company, and the other half of the week I would be going, get my hands dirty with oil paint, and started a set of paintings that were supposed to become an exhibition. And I only finished like 2 of them, and then one of my clients, who's actually the clients of the 3D company, he was a huge fan of the work I did commercially, because the company I worked on, they had this folder with lots of my personal drawings, and that's something they showed to clients for pitching, and he said, I want this guy to do all the designs. And so he was a big fan. And when he learned that I got into painting, he kind of connected me with the owner of a fashion company who lived in Tunisia, and I would have gotten a really good price for it too. And I was like, no exhibition, no art dealer, just through friends, right? And but it turned out, because the piece is quite large, it's almost 3 meters wide. So having to build a box around this and the insurance and all that turned out to be such a headache that I kept it.
How did he feel about that?
He was sad. He said, like, I really would have liked to have it. But now I feel like it's anytime I have friends over, or meet new people, they come to my office and look at it, and I tell them, like, yeah, it's not something I bought. I actually did that in 2006. And they're like, wow, you also paint with oils. So it's a good reference thing for me to have. So I don't regret it that I didn't sell it. But it's like one of the advantages of crypto, right? You never really having to let go of this physical piece. And because I heard this from a couple of painters and traditional artists I'm connected with, that sometimes, or almost all of the times, they never see that piece again. They never get their eyes on that painting again. Only if it's going to become of a museum, part of a museum collection or something like that. But usually if it's in private collections, and like I said, in traditional art, usually you don't have that personal connection with the collector. It's just gone, and you maybe have a photo of it. And so that a divorce, which can be painful, is not happening in crypto. It's like one plus for crypto, I guess.
That's a really interesting perspective. It's in one sense handing over a physical painting to a private collection. Like you said, you may literally never see that painting again. You may never tactily, be able to experience it only through photos or anything you managed to capture prior to parting with it. And yeah, in crypto and in digital art ownership, it becomes more of a symbiotic or shared experience, because even if
Yes.
it is in that private collection, that the wall is still taken down. You can still visit whenever you want.
Exactly. There's like I think during the Renaissance, private collectors would have like the most precious paintings. I think they were sometimes behind curtains, and then as a special moment, they would have guests take a peek behind that curtain, which makes it even more like this very exclusive, no one else but the elite can actually put their eyes on it. And in a way, the crypto art has a bit of this disruptiveness to it, where we can just have a handheld projector in some back alley on a behind some electronic music club or something, and then just project it on a wall like digital graffiti or something. So it's always with you, and it's always accessible, and it creates this feeling of democratizing it. So no entrance fees, no barriers, no it's just there to be seen, and it's a good thing that it is that way. And I think that's one of the things that was so amazing, like in 2021, when those first videos popped up on Twitter, those huge billboards on Times Square, and where some of the collections were shared, and people were making all these videos, and I got lucky to be connected with Art Crush Gallery, who have been creating this world tour. And so we also had our pieces at Times Square, and it was this big moment. And it's definitely, you could basically show the art simultaneously in all the big cities. And I don't know, like this accessibility and the idea to surround ourselves and the world, to to paint the world in a way is I don't know, is a sense of freedom to it, I think.
Seeing that happen more and more is really, really exciting. I remember we did a New York City Times Square takeover for Artifacts in May of 2021. And it was such
amazing. Yes, I remember.
It was such a unique moment that we have a photo. It was when the world was beginning for the first time to really break out of the COVID era.
Yes.
Masks were still worn. It still wasn't super common to be out there running around in public, but it was beginning to get more normal again. And we have this photo in Times Square, and it was the first intersection of I think it was Brian Brinkman and Gavin Shapiro, and Matt Medved and Parrot and Surjit. There's this collection, Current 4D. There's this collection of people who have gone on to amazing things within this space.
Totally
unique moment in time.
Beautiful.
So let's talk about your art. I want to dig into your art a little bit more. You do, as you mentioned before, you have this juxtaposition of let's say some more classical styles, but also how do you term it, mythical creatures, or taking inspiration from fairy tales?
Yes, there's a wide range of inspirations, and sometimes and also skill sets. Like I said, 3D animation. I'm like, for the animated pieces, I'm sometimes even doing the sound design by myself. And I don't know, like, I sometimes wish I was only really good at one medium, like oil painting, and I probably would have gotten, maybe I would have gotten further, because now this because I can go in so many directions, it's become this meandering path instead of this this really focused point. And but I guess it's just in the end, it's part of of my identity, and I should embrace it. But I guess there's a thread that connects everything, and I think it goes back to my childhood, where I was always fascinated by characters in all forms, I guess. And I have a large collection that's constantly growing of characters that have interested me, but also are so unique. And I don't know, it's like it's a large library of characters that kind of work in an art context. And I think the fascination, I think we're all kind of fascinated by characters for one reason or the other. Especially when you look at kids, they start collecting some kind of toy, or then some kind of toy, or a toy that's coming, is a merchandise from a movie, and it becomes this. They sometimes become obsessed with this one figure from a movie or something. And I think there's something deeper. Like, I've thought about this often when I was working as a character designer. I'm still working as a character designer, and there's always this idea of archetypes and mythology, and how these recognizable shapes and how they kind of connect with our unconscious. It's almost like this shared memory of something that has been there for a long time, and instantly sets free like a set of emotions or associations. And I think I will never, because I'm so fascinated by that, I will never fully go into abstraction, because I will always try to find this, like, even like lately I've been trying to deconstruct the figure in more and more, but I want I want to keep that connection with the unconscious, and with the past, and with I don't know. I feel it gives it a context that otherwise gets lost if I completely let go of it.
Touching on characters, I'll give you a little bit of a blitz round. The first character to ever fascinate you. Do you have a memory of it?
Ah, yeah. It's probably must have been fascinated by something earlier than I can like have a memory. But some of the very early ones that had a that really affected me were E.T.
Mm-hmm.
That was like that was the first movie I watched, and I still come back to the weirdness of this design because it's not a pretty looking creature, but it's also not just ugly or I don't know. It's something else entirely. It shouldn't exist actually. It's like in a nowadays movie context, you wouldn't probably design a creature like that. But at that time, or maybe because of probably Steven Spielberg looked at a lot of different approaches and designs, and it's probably part of his genius that he chose this one. Um, but that one deeply affected me. I had it in all shapes and sizes. I had like a one that was kind of like a stuffy, so I could have it in my bed, and uh, and then some of like rubber, and one that could be wound up and walk around, and I was super fascinated by it. Lots of drawings. I lit lots of like in all cutout drawings and crayons. My mom's probably still has some of them. And after that, it was Star Wars, specifically because uh, the old in the old packaging during that time in the 80s was had photos, like movie stills, uh, printed on the packaging. And I was too young to, or at least my parents didn't allow me to see the film. And so I was able to memorize all these little snippets of the film that I saw in these packagings, and rushed home. Like it was like mom was going for the groceries, and I was sitting, hanging out in the kids' toy area, and memorize like all these different creatures. And right when I got back home, drawing as much as I could remember, and trying to come up with my own storyline for it. But the interesting thing from today's perspective is that I wasn't drawn to the hero characters or the not so much the popular ones. It was mostly the ones that had a really strangeness to, like a really strange design angle. And one of them, for example, was IG-88. This is one of the bounty hunter robot. And later I found out that the the head is actually an engine part of a Rolls-Royce motor or engine. And it literally looks like the head of IG-88. You can buy it on eBay. and there's something so, and that's such an odd thing to do, right? Like you're not designing the rover, just taking some engine part and sticking it on the on the top. And but it and several designs kind of have this kind of strange angle to them, especially from that time. And like Droopy McCool, like he's one of the band members. He looks like a naked mole, like a naked mole rat or something, but super chubby, and looks like a nightmarish version of some Jim Henson Muppet or something. And I could go on and on. Like there's so much inspiration still coming from Star Wars, and I even have like something that I created 2 years ago and actually pitched to Netflix, was the idea of something like a comedy show with characters that kind of look a bit like the Star Wars Cantina characters, but more contemporary and um, more comedy. And they would be playing in some sort of Saturday Night Live kind of context, very surreal and comedic events with not a linear narrative, but more like these little vignettes. And they actually were really interested in it. And now I'm still thinking at some point I want to at least do just for myself to do a couple of these episodes, because would be, I don't know, like it's like my two favorite things, like Monty Python Flying Circus mixed with the Star Wars Cantina, basically. And I kind of, you see glimpses of these type of characters in my paintings and in the NFT releases I did. Yeah.
So before we get to the NFT releases more specifically, and you shared something quite recently, the what you pitched to Netflix, but taking a step back to your childhood or adolescence, do you remember when you took inspiration from ET and you took inspiration from various Star Wars characters with some unusual design elements? Do you remember some of the earliest characters you concepted prior to becoming an official, character designer later?
You mean like versions of well-known established characters, or
let me ask it differently. Do you remember the first truly original character that you created and then stuck with? In other words, that you didn't draw once, but that became a symbol of yours that maybe you used for a period of time?
I didn't continue to use it, but there's one specific creature that I did. It was actually something I created for a friend in exchange for, because he's a web designer and he wanted to create my website, which he didn't in the end. But the good part was I created this creature that looks a bit like a hybrid human and pig, but it also looks a bit like a I don't know, he looks like a bare knuckle boxer or something, or like a pig version of Tyler Durden in the Fight Club or something like that. And this thing, once I released this online in some 3D or like a concept art forum, it made huge waves. Like I still meet people like they still remember this thing flying all over the internet back then. That was like 2006, 2007. And I don't know, like even a couple of years later, someone would send me a photo where there was some demonstration in Spain, and they had, a version of this printed on a, how do you call it? Like on a banner or something, and carrying it around in the street, and put the name of some politician on top or something like that. And yeah, this kind of seemed to have struck a chord. And interestingly, it was the thing that got me the Tim Burton job in the end, where I became Alice in Wonderland character designer.
I don't know that I'll ever forget the analogy provided, the crossover between a pig and Tyler Durden from Fight Club. That somehow hit home very, very directly. And now I have a checklist of 2 items that I have to track down, hopefully with your help after this. But that is 1, the image of that character, and 2, your original artwork, your physical artwork from 2006. I'm very curious.
Yes.
That. So we have a checklist of 2 things that.
Yes, I will provide it.
Amazing. So let's go. Let's jump a little bit ahead and let's get to some of the artworks that you shared within the NFT space, within the crypto art space. And then of course you going to your super rare profile first and looking at Seeker and I Promised You Nothing and the Connoisseur, which we talked about a bit earlier, because Ixulo is the esteemed owner. The thing that strikes me about all 3 of those things is they all are faceless. in one context or another.
Mhm.
Can you go into that a bit?
Yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot. Like what the initial thing was that made me go in that direction, and I think it has to do with, because I am a character designer for film, and the face, especially the eyes, are the focal point. It's a bit like, how can I create something? It's almost like a sometimes it feels like a cheap trick if if is as if I'm trying, as if you're making beautiful eyes and people are instantly drawn to it, and it's kind of luring you into the painting or something. And I didn't want to get people interested in my work because I know how to, create these compelling faces or something, but more like because of the broader idea, or the composition and the unique form language. And so for some reason, and I in some of my pieces there are faces like fully formed. The one with the raft, that poets don't cry. You see this old kind of pirate, but he's almost like a visual joke in midst these other characters. He's almost like coming from a different period of painting, and he's just like, I just set him in there, completely alienated by the rest of it. And the idea of the classically painted face inside of a thing that's, has these glitch elements, and sometimes even just cut out flat shapes, is almost like juxtaposing it, almost like making fun of it. Like like the idea of having this like old-fashioned hat, and like being in the painter's studio, and mixing your own paint and all that. Is all this romanticized view, but we're so far detached from that that it's almost funny to think, to want to still kind of uh, be that type of artist, because we use 3D, we use whatever kind of we use AI, any kind of tool to get the idea across. And but I think leaving the faces also creates some kind of, and there's also several examples in Star Wars. Some of my favorite characters don't have faces, which are the Java, for example, or IG-88, Boba Fett. You can, and it's interesting, like with the Boba Fett series, you can play, you can create a whole story around this character, and only seeing his face once, and which is kind of interesting. It's creating this idea of, we imagine what's behind there, and I think that's something that gets me interested in when designing these figures. It's almost like putting a couple of people on a stage, but deliberately disguising them with, animal fur. Like some of my characters have this kind of like these traditional chagata costumes that they in European carnival festivals, and kind of breaking the human form in a way that it becomes a bit more frightening or mythical, and more of it becomes more of the idea of a person, and not a specific person or something. So, and in the end, by having these different designs and put into context with each other, like costumes, for example, from different periods mixed with very futuristic elements, it creates this sense of I don't know, sometimes I feel they are like in some kind of digital, I call it digital limbo, actually. And it's almost like they are like in this waiting pattern. Is there's this room where just they stuck in forever. It's a half finished metaverse that's, you know, it's still glitchy. It doesn't have all the, you know, luxuries. And it's crammed with, you know, all the things from the past and from the present. And they kind of trying to get by. And and I have a weakness for these sidekick characters in you know, in Star Wars and other shows and movies, who are kind of they never have enough love or money to, there's always something lacking, and that keeps me interested, I think, in these types of characters.
It's fascinating. Where my mind went first is that you were giving yourself a constraint, just how you started to describe those first three artworks, you know, giving yourself a powerful and positive constraint to say, I want this to be about more than maybe one of the things I know that I could do easily or readily.
Yes.
I think that's fascinating. And then as you talked further, you're exploring the beauty, the messy gray area and juxtaposition between certain things. I think it's fascinating to hear what you just said. And I was scrolling your art at the same time. Would recommend to anyone listening, go back and scroll Michael's artwork as he's describing it. It's an enjoyable experience.
Thanks.
So I biased the starter question there, and began with those first three artworks, but maybe talk about another highlight or two along your journey, whether that be Sotheby's or otherwise.
Yeah. Do you mean how the Sotheby's piece came together, or?
I guess I ended up biasing the conversation anyway, but no, I guess any other artworks along this digital art road, well, along the crypto art road specifically, but past those first three initial ones, any one or two that stand out to you, whether it's because of the anecdotes that surrounded them or because of the artworks themselves.
They always feel like long journeys. Maybe that's something interesting to point out, that when I create most of these characters for film, and they, like, from a craft point, there's a lot of, you know, skill set involved into, you know, from the creating realistic fur and realistic clothing and the, you know, putting it into the right lighting, and then in the end having the character has just the right attitude to fit in that story and to carry that all the meaning of the story, then that seems like a lot, and it probably is, but I usually do these in 3 days, and so that's like from sketch to the final painting, and I don't use any 3D or anything for that. It's just really straight on painted in Photoshop, similar to how a painter would do it on an easel with oils. But with a personal art, it's a whole different game. I usually never have a sketch and then it turns out to be the exact same thing, just with colors in the end. But it changes so much over time that I could easily, I don't know, there's a whole collection of images in the end, and then there's a final one. But if I wouldn't, you know, tell myself, okay, stop, I would probably do it for another year, because it's like this really deep internal conversation. And I think David Lynch wrote this book, Catching the Big Fish, how he's finding these ideas. And I'm a big fan of David Lynch because I don't know, he seems to create scenes that are, you watch them again and again, and you have no idea where they're coming from, or even to describe what you feel when you see them. Like, it's this weird mix of emotions of it makes you want to laugh, but you're really frightened at the same time. And it's interesting that he says he's doing this through meditation, and he's imagining that to catch these bigger ideas, you have to dive really deeply in your unconscious, and you have to find techniques to unlock these things that are hidden deeply. And I think this is what I'm going through when I'm doing my personal work, because I have a feeling if it's right, but it's not really from a design standpoint. It's not really like the problem solving because with character design, it's like, okay, it's this type of story. He has to, and there's layers of his personality, but at least there's like one anchor that holds it all together, and where this works, and the set of eyes doesn't work, you have to do this. And so it's more mechanical, or more like a more practical. But with the personal work, it's just a feeling that you're chasing. It's just this feeling of like this, it is somewhere out there, and you get a glimpse of it, but you never see it in its fullness. And for the rest of the couple of weeks I'm working on this thing, I'm trying to put together what that initial feeling was. And all of those pieces have that. And in a way, that's why they're all also very different. I mean, the Connoisseur is very different from the Floating Boy, which is a full 3D animation. And I see this approach with some other artists, like Alpha Centauri Kid, for example. He has like it's almost like several artists combined in one artist. But I kind of like this approach, because like there's not one style that fits all. Like, and if you want to say more as an artist, you have to have like a combination of approaches. And sometimes in my case, I'm really imagining, because for some time I have been doing these like paintings that have just slightly animated elements, but also because I have a motion capture suit at home, and I did a bunch of these. I mean, it's a really fun process to get into shoes of one of these characters and act them. And it's something I want to revisit, especially with the inspiration I'm getting from Joe Pease. Because I see, like, in some of his work, I see it reminds me of some of my favorite directors, like Roy Andersson, for example, is a Swedish director. He's creating these very bleak films where people seem to be stuck in some kind of limbo and they are have these strange habits. And I see this with these animated loops, or his filmed loops, where some guy is just going through paperwork, or he's trying to hold his desk together or something like that. And there's a huge inspiration. So I'm thinking, like, yeah, I want to revisit animated pieces and create this sort of not really like filmed shots where where it becomes too much of a movie, but more like a vignette where you see like the whole frame, but inside of it there's like several segments of these invented characters that are in some kind of afterlife and trying to give themselves meaning or something. And yeah, I think I kind of went in all directions now.
How was it with your character experience and character sort of development and design backdrop? How was it encountering Web3 characters and deciding to incorporate them into your artworks?
Yeah, instant fascination, I have to say, because there's a richness to this meme culture, and these recurring themes, and it's almost like a shared consciousness. Like people tap into that, and why is I mean, I can totally understand why Pepe is kind of like the Mickey Mouse of Web3 and beyond, and there's and I like building, like when creating something, to have a starting point, and I like to see other artists use that as well. in terms of appropriation, where you use some things that have been tested and tried in particular shapes, or characters in pop culture that have so many layers of meaning because it's been used all over the internet for several types of to hammer a point home. You use this type of meme, or you use this one, and it creates this richness of emotions that is already embedded, versus if you create something completely out of context, it's like a white piece of paper. People will have to kind of learn what it is before you can actually do something with it. And so that's why I'm using a lot of like appropriation in my work, and I embrace the culture in Web3 where this is like so encouraged, and I see, you know, other artists using this technique, and it also creates a sense of togetherness, like we're this being part of this like an art movement, which this is, and very fascinated by it.
Yeah, it's fascinating to again review your artwork and see, just as we honed in on sometimes going the faceless route and playing with that idea and constraining yourself. It's also fascinating to see this collection of singular characters, and then this collection of sometimes 10 characters in one artwork, and seeing them exist together and interact together. So enjoying that element too.
Thank you.
So Michael, one question I like to ask, it's actually a two-pronged question, and you can go specifically to your own art career. You can talk about this personally, or you can broaden back out and talk about the space, or even just the broader totality of art itself. When we lean into the future topic, what is one thing that you expect out of the future, and what is one thing that you hope for but don't necessarily expect?
Yeah, I think for a lot of the artists in the space, and myself, it's a bit, and we've seen artists like Alpha Centauri Kid and Grant Yoon going in this direction of having physical pieces again, as opposed to having everything digital. And with Grant's avant-arte drop, for example, or also Jake Fry did an avant-arte drop with these amazing lenticulars. And it's something that has, I guess, two reasons why I'm interested in this. One is the lack of really good art displays, or if there are some that are great, but they're so unaffordable that usually exhibitions end up having Samsung screens, and you have black bars on left and right, or top and bottom. I actually just sourced a display from a manufacturer in China with a custom wooden frame, so that I, at least at my home, have some, you know, version of that where I feel like, oh, this is an adequate way to show animated digital art. Otherwise, I cannot spend over, what is it, over 30,000 on a Danvers display. Yeah. It's
not accessible.
I mean, they're like not accessible. Yeah, exactly. So there has been, that has been a bit disappointing sometimes. And this is also like one of the reasons why I'm thinking, okay, how, and lenticulars are a particular good way to do it, because it still has part of the animation. It's physical. It doesn't need the power cable, and you're not limited to an aspect ratio. You can basically do it in any kind of aspect ratio and size you want. And but I think it's also important, because I mean, the question has been floating around from the beginning, where people said like, but how do you show it? Or like, if I buy an NFT, where would I put it? And I think blurring the lines a little bit, I think that's like an important step into like moving forward. Also for having traditional galleries, maybe thinking about having a natively digital artist as part of their roster. Things like that. I think that's and it's like also like one of the things I'm personally interested into going in that direction. I mean, I'm even thinking about already have a couple of sketches and concepts for pieces that are hybrid, where it's basically having traits of a physical painting, but also some elements that are digitally displayed. Um, and Thank You Axe basically did a few pieces like that, and that got me kind of inspired. And but it's I think that's a just a natural way of like mixing the elements, and that we're, and especially in this market right now where it feels like the collectors who have total conviction in it are yeah, their bags are depleted. They bought so much of this art that yeah, it's just like a need for traditional collectors to come in. And I think by going in this more physical direction with like in some of these examples, it makes it easier to onboard them. And yeah, I think that's like one of my wishes for the near future.
It's fascinating to hear you talk about that because Thank You X, one of my favorite people and artists in the space. Yeah, I mean, when he started playing with that intersection of infinite object screens immersed in his larger paintings, was immediately taken with that concept, and he's continued to do that at various times and places, and we really don't see it much. And so hearing you say that, I think that's and no surprise, right? In your artworks, you're constantly playing with these two concepts that sometimes come together, exploring the intersection of those concepts. So I guess I'm not that surprised that you're exploring that intersection as well. So would you classify as that something that you expect us to explore in the future?
Yeah, 100%. Like I'm already working in in that direction, and I think we will also see coming more from other artists. And the way it like how long it takes to blur these boundaries, that's another question. And yeah, I guess it takes gallerists or curators with the eyes set on the horizon, and being, you know, more willing to go in these like outer branches of what can be done. What does how does the art of the future look like? But they have been challenged too. I mean, the traditional art space, and a lot of people have been saying this, that because of Instagram, there's some I forgot the name of the artist. There's one who basically became famous because of Instagram, and he at first didn't have a gallery. He was just selling his work through Instagram and finding his collectors there. Now he's with one of the blue chip galleries, and so even there, the social media and this whole metaverse idea has been disruptive and has been restructuring the hierarchy, and it's constantly shifting, even outside of NFTs, I would say.
Yeah, a landscape that can be either maddening at times or incredibly opportunity laden at times, depending upon how you approach it and the time and
Yes,
place.
yes. It's definitely more intense than it used to be, I guess, 20
For,
years ago.
for
Well,
sure. And you see sometimes those accelerated opportunities come at the heels of an artist very clearly taking up a second job that is consistent, that the engagement and crafting the posts and the context and the story around it and the narrative that builds up. It very clearly, I've been amazed at the quantity of hours that must go into some of these approaches that you see then accelerating.
absolutely. Yeah. It's almost, you wish for these artists to become more successful so they can hire someone to do these extra things, so they can actually spend more time making art. And it's something I've been struggling with as well, I have to say. Yeah.
Yeah, it's I think it's an impossibility to not struggle with it. But like you said, I think some of these individuals who are accelerating so fast, getting over that hump, achieving that success, and then taking a very long vacation at some point
Yes,
to decompress.
yes, yes, totally.
Michael, who should be on the future of art in the future, in terms of a guest?
There's a lesser known artist, but I'm a pretty big fan of his work. He's creating longer format animated pieces that are very symbolic and surreal, and he's creating this very distinct synthesizer sound to it. His name is Kutsche. I don't even maybe I'm pronouncing it not correctly, but yeah, I can send you the link to his profile. Yeah.
Please do. Can't wait to explore.
Mm-hmm.
I've developed an appreciation for your aesthetic and for
Mm-hmm.
your approach in general. And by the way,
Thank you.
fun side note in just exploring your character background. Two
Mm-hmm.
characters that I was immediately taken with is your portrayal of Ed from Lion King and your portrayal
Oh.
of the caterpillar from Alice in Wonderland.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it was based on the actor Alan Rickman, but I mean that was a really fun project to work on. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean they're immediately emotive and they immediately transport me to sections of the films. So. And then how about where can people find you? Where would you like to interact with people or where can they review your work?
Lately I've been, but I haven't been much active there yet. It's something that I kind of like pushed forward a little bit. I'm on Threads, and yeah, I mean the main interaction point would still be X. Do you call it X or Twitter?
Oh, this is the first Future of Art episode recorded after the transition. So I guess we
Yeah,
are no longer talking about Twitter.
yeah, we're talking about X, and yeah, but I actually turned my homepage into my actual art page, because it used to be more centered around character design, but now it's mostly focused on the personal art, and there's all the other links you can find there. Yeah.
I guess that means you might be here to stay.
Yes, it's I would say so.
Well, I think that's exciting, and I think from from a sharing on X perspective, while I know you go through some periods of time where you're retweeting amazing things, but every now and again you are checking in with an incredibly thoughtful perspective on something, an incredibly thoughtful thread. We had talked earlier about the relationship sort of between art and price, which I think was one of those interesting opinions that you held lately. And again, I really value them as someone who has decades plural of experience and has seen it all and has now been in this space for between 2 and 3 going on 3 years. It's really, really valuable perspective. I'm glad to hear you continue to step forward and share it. I think it's needed. I think there are a lot of those voices out there with real rich, deep experience, and bringing them to the forefront is why I'm so glad we were able to do this interview. But bringing them to the forefront, I think, is also part of what changes that overarching narrative and just continues to surge this into the inevitable future, which, as you know, I believe is digital art is art. Respect across the board that we see it held alongside a lot of these infamous art styles.
Thank you. Yeah, usually when I'm going on a morning walk, I having these quick ideas. It's like this internal monologue about what's happening in the space and art in general, and I have a large collection of these. Like I only need to find time to put them in these threads, and but I'm glad to hear you appreciate them.
Whatever the right cadence is for you, absolutely here for it. And just really can't wait to get this interview out and share it with people and research those examples. I have my checklist of things that I now want to explore, which includes a fascinating artist that you mentioned and recommended, and then of course your original artwork and some of the character designs you mentioned as well.
Thank you.
Well, onward to the future. Appreciate you. Appreciate your time, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, Roger. It's been a real pleasure, and yeah, keep doing the great work that you do. It's really sending a great signal across the space.
Thank you, man. Thank you for listening and for being part of the future of art. If you liked what you heard, please do subscribe and drop a review on your favorite podcast platform. Onward to the many interviews that await us. The Future of Art is produced by Artifex. Artifex, Artifex, was created to honor today's top digital fine artists in 3 dimensions. Each artist's one-of-one work of art becomes a collectible 3D sculpture and centerpiece of an immersive world built in Unreal Engine, the creation tool of Epic Games. Visit at artifex_project on Instagram to experience those sculptures in AR, and visit artifex.art/unreal to literally step inside the art on your browser.